The controversy is this: when the family matriarch, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, passed away, everyone expected the fight to be over money. What no one expected was for the will to go missing, or that it had been, the entire time, in the possession of the most underestimated man in the house. This script is long, but hang in there. Because the twist awaiting you isn't just about who gets the inheritance. It's about a life lesson that proves the greatest secret of love wasn't in wealth, but in the dignity of a gardener. In the next few minutes, you will discover how a simple man, with hands calloused by the earth, can be the heir to an empire. The Vance mansion, in Aspen, Colorado, was an architectural jewel. Imposing, with gardens that looked like they were taken from a fairy tale. The person responsible for this green perfection was not, of course, Mr. Walter Vance, the distant nephew, a lawyer, and a boastful man who had spent the last week sniffing out papers. The responsible one was Ethan. Ethan had skin tanned by the mountain sun and a silence that, to many, was cowardice; to him, it was dignity. He used simple grammar and a straightforward way of speaking, but he rarely opened his mouth. He spent his life there, caring for the camellias that Mrs. Eleanor loved so much. That autumn morning, the crisp air of Aspen only made the atmosphere inside the mansion heavier. Mrs. Eleanor had passed away just 2 weeks ago, and mourning had already been replaced by the scent of greed. Ethan was pruning a rose bush next to the porch when he heard the shrill voice. It was Mr. Walter Vance. He noticed how loudly Walter spoke on the phone, treating the matriarch's assistant with the same arrogance he would treat an antique piece of furniture, or worse, Ethan himself. "Where the hell is this damn second will? I am the legal heir and I'm not going to waste time on trash," Walter ranted, slamming his fist on the glass table. To Walter, Ethan was just a shadow outside, an operational cost. The lawyer's lack of humanity was blatant. Meanwhile, the only person who seemed to notice Ethan's presence was Mrs. Agnes, the elderly neighbor, leaning on the wooden fence. She didn't talk about inheritance, but she talked about the past. "Ethan," she said in a low, raspy voice, "you know Eleanor's Rosiere was never the garden. And Walter is an imbecile. Be careful, son." Ethan nodded silently. He knew. He remembered every detail, every spring, every secret he shared with Mrs. Eleanor. There was a secret of love there, buried beneath the polished surface of that procedural justice. He remembered the day she gave him the key to a small reliquary she called the proof of our character. He had never asked what was inside, as his dignity was greater than his curiosity. Mr. Walter Vance stormed out of the mansion, stumbling with rage, and glared at Ethan with contempt. "Gardener, if by chance you see any paper, anything that looks important, you hand it to me. Don't lie, or I'll have you out. Understand?" Ethan just nodded and returned to his pruning. But inside, he wondered, what was in that reliquary? And why had Mrs. Agnes mentioned her Rosiere, if he was the official gardener? What was he still hiding, after all, that Mr. Walter Vance, in his blind arrogance, would never imagine? Ethan spent the rest of the day at the mansion with his mind far from the pruning shears. Mrs. Agnes's phrase, "Eleanor's Rosiere was never the garden," echoed in his head. It wasn't just a play on words, it was a clue. Walter, the lawyer in the tight suit, didn't even notice the gardener's unease. He was too busy talking loudly on his cell phone about how to wrap up this inventory nonsense soon. His arrogance was like the strong smell of cheap poison, obvious and toxic. That night, under the weak light of the tool shed where he lived, Ethan picked up the reliquary. It was a simple wooden box, worn by time, but kept with the care of an inestimable treasure. Inside, there was only a single key, of an ancient bronze, and a folded piece of paper, with Mrs. Eleanor's elegant handwriting. The paper was not a will. It was a short note. "Ethan, my love. Our secret is with those who saw us born. Our future, in the Rosiere. Remember our day." The part about "our secret is with those who saw us born" made Ethan think immediately of Mrs. Agnes. The old neighbor was, in fact, the only living person who knew the depth of the secret of love between the gardener and the matriarch. They met young, but the social circumstances of the time forced them onto separate paths. Eleanor's marriage to the Vance patriarch was one of convenience, but the character of both made Ethan remain close, in silence, as the guardian of what was and what could have been. Our day, he remembered. The day Mrs. Eleanor bought the seed of the first rose bush of a rare type he had never seen before. A flower that wasn't called a rose, but a very rare orchid, of French origin, which she affectionately nicknamed Rosiere. He got up and went to the greenhouse. All eyes in the mansion were focused on the safes and drawers. No one would ever think to look in a flower pot. Using a weak flashlight to avoid drawing attention, Ethan found the Rosiere orchid. It was the only plant he hadn't transplanted for years, and it sat in a heavy ceramic pot. Ethan, with his skilled hands, began to remove the soil. And there, at the bottom, wrapped in a piece of plastic, he found something solid. It wasn't the will. It was a small metal box, very well sealed, with a lock. A lock that exactly matched the key to the reliquary. A slow, bitter smile crossed Ethan's face. Eleanor's justice was subtle, but profound. She had let Mr. Walter Vance, with all his ambition and arrogance, rummage through the world looking for a piece of paper, while the truth was hidden in the very humanity of the garden he despised. He had the box. But opening it there, in that greenhouse, could be risky. Mr. Walter Vance might have cameras or security watching. He needed a safe place and confirmation from Mrs. Agnes. The twist was almost ready to be served. But first, he had to leave the mansion unnoticed. With the small metal box in his hands, wrapped in an old cloth, Ethan felt a weight that was not just material, it was the weight of 40 years of love's secret and the weight of impending justice. He knew that Mr. Walter Vance, in his blind arrogance and haste to close the inventory, was dangerous. If he found out what Ethan had, the gardener would be finished, and Mrs. Eleanor's wish, desecrated. Leaving the Vance mansion was not an easy task. Walter had hired outsourced security, guys who looked more like bored bouncers than professional watchmen. Ethan noticed they were paid to focus on the front of the mansion and the main safe, never caring about the back area or the greenhouse. To them, the gardener was just a ghost who posed no threat. Another proof of the new owner's lack of humanity and superficiality. Ethan waited for the dead of night. The fog of Aspen, dense and cold, was his ally. He used his years of experience on that land to move without making a sound. He jumped the back fence, through a section hidden by bushes that he himself had planted decades ago. The destination was Mrs. Agnes's house, 2 blocks away. When he arrived, the old neighbor was already waiting for him, with a steaming teapot on the kitchen table and eyes full of serene dignity. She was the guardian of the past, the only one who saw how pure Ethan's character was, even when he was forced to live in the shadows. "I knew you would come. Eleanor always knew you were the only man who deserved more than she had to give," Agnes said, offering him coffee. Ethan placed the metal box on the table. "What's in here, Agnes?" "Walter is frantic looking for the will, but this doesn't look like a document." Mrs. Agnes smiled, a smile full of wisdom and life lesson. She looked at the box and then at Ethan. "It's not paper, son. It's something much more valuable. Do you remember the day Eleanor gave you the key to the reliquary? That day, she did something more. A final act of reversal. She then leaned in, and the humanity in her voice was palpable. Eleanor knew that if she left the will in the common form, the family's arrogance would tear it up or hide it. She left the most important inheritance, Ethan. And the only way to prove your right to everything was with the proof of who you two truly were to each other. Ethan felt his heart clench. The reliquary key was in his pocket, the key that opened the box was there, on the table. But what was inside was the real question. It wasn't just about money. It was about the love that defied social classes. Mrs. Agnes encouraged him, "Open it, Ethan. It's time to teach Mr. Walter Vance the true meaning of justice. Let's move forward. This is the crucial moment of the twist, where the secret of love transforms into the proof of justice that will unmask the arrogance of Mr. Walter Vance. Ethan took the bronze key from the reliquary, the same one Mrs. Eleanor had given him years ago, not as a gift, but as a silent promise of dignity. The click of the metal box's lock, in the quiet of Mrs. Agnes's kitchen, sounded louder than Mr. Walter Vance's roar. And inside the box, there was no money, no obvious jewelry. There were 3 items: an old voice recording, a microcassette, a necklace with the Rosiere orchid embedded, and a sealed envelope. Ethan's heart pounded. Mrs. Agnes took the recorder and inserted the tape. A noise was heard, and suddenly, Mrs. Eleanor's voice filled the room. A calm, yet firm voice, full of humanity. "If you are hearing this, my dear Ethan, it means I am no longer here, and that, very likely, Mr. Walter Vance and his cronies must be tearing through the mansion looking for a piece of paper. They seek the law, but they ignore justice." Walter's arrogance was so great that he would never have imagined the matriarch would use technology and affection to ensure the truth prevailed. Eleanor continued the recording, and her voice was the life lesson itself. "The money they seek so much is not in the forged paper they must have found. The money, Ethan, was always secondary. What I leave you is the proof of our character." The sealed envelope contains a Codicil Will, duly authenticated and registered in Denver, Colorado, 5 years ago. It annuls any subsequent document. The matriarch explained the love secret. The Codicil Will was legally unassailable and recognized Ethan not only as the universal heir to all real estate but also as her life partner, irrefutably guaranteeing his rights. She had hidden the original document in a bank vault, outside Aspen, and given Ethan the key to find it. The Rosiere necklace, she explained, was the code to the vault. A code that only the 2 of them knew. The twist was complete. The man who cleaned up other people's messes now held the legal weapon to clean up the moral mess of an entire family. Ethan was no longer just the gardener, he was the universal heir, the holder of justice and truth. His dignity, tested by Walter's arrogance, would finally be rewarded. But one step was still missing: facing Walter, the arrogant lion, on the battlefield of the law. And Ethan knew that for that, he would need a legal ally who possessed the same humanity as he did. Excellent. We have reached the turning point in the story, where Ethan needs strategy so his justice triumphs over Walter's arrogance. The sun began to break through the Aspen fog, and with it, certainty for Ethan. He needed a lawyer. But not just any lawyer, one of those pretentious, pompous, and arrogant ones like Walter. He needed someone with character and humanity. Mrs. Agnes suggested a name. "Look for attorney Sarah, Ethan. She's young, but she has the fire of justice in her eyes. She isn't easily bought and, more importantly, she values dignity." Ethan took the advice. He used the little money he had to travel, with the recording and the Rosiere necklace safely hidden, to Denver. He knew that Mr. Walter Vance would already be pressuring the county clerk in Aspen to speed up the inventory, counting on Ethan's invisibility. Upon meeting attorney Sarah, Ethan got straight to the point. He told the story of the secret of love with Mrs. Eleanor, the entire life of work and scorn, Walter's arrogance, and the discovery of the box. He placed the voice recording on the table. Attorney Sarah listened to everything, without interrupting, absorbing with every word not just the account, but the implicit life lesson. When Mrs. Eleanor's voice on the recording finished, the lawyer's eyes were shining. "Ethan," she said, with a firm voice, "what you have here is much stronger than a common will. It is irrefutable proof of an effective bond and the legal nullification of any subsequent document." Mr. Walter Vance, in his arrogance, only looked where it was easy. He never imagined Mrs. Eleanor's intelligence and dignity. The twist plan was simple, yet brilliant. They wouldn't just present the codicil. They would let Walter sink deeper into his own conceit. "Walter has called a final meeting in his office tomorrow, to officialize the inheritance," Ethan explained. He wants to gloat. Attorney Sarah smiled. Perfect. That's where we'll strike the blow. You will go as Ethan, the silent gardener, and I, as your attorney. We'll let him smell victory, so that his fall is the greatest justice ever seen. Get ready, Ethan. Tomorrow, the invisibility ends. Ethan felt a tremor. Almost 40 years of silence and disrespect would come to an end. His character would finally be recognized. Mr. Walter Vance's office in Denver was the personification of arrogance, cold marble, expensive leather chairs, and a panoramic view that made everyone feel small. The conference table was set for the celebration that Walter believed would be his. Ethan entered the room next to Attorney Sarah. He wore his best suit, but his shoes still held the discreet scent of the earth from Aspen, a mark of his dignity and character. Walter, seated at the head of the table, barely glanced at them. His humanity was so buried under his arrogance that he didn't even offer a seat. "Ah, the gardener," he sneered, speaking loudly and unnecessarily. "I thought you'd be waiting outside. You brought a lawyer? What a waste of time. The inventory is almost finalized. You only came to sign the severance and the paltry check the family decided to give you out of pity, Ethan." Attorney Sarah smiled, a sharp smile. She realized Walter's arrogance was so great that he hadn't even bothered to check her credentials in the court system. Walter began the meeting, boasting about the impeccable work he had done in searching for his aunt's will, and how justice had been served, completely ignoring Ethan's presence. He went so far as to say that the deceased's character was so good that she wouldn't mind leaving the inheritance to her nephew. "It's a pity, Walter, that your aunt, Mrs. Eleanor, had a better character than yours," Attorney Sarah intervened, her voice cutting. Walter stopped, offended. "Who are you to talk about my aunt? What can this gardener clown possibly have against me?" Ethan, the man of silence, finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy, full of life lesson. "I am Ethan, and you stole what was mine 40 years ago, Walter. And you tried to steal Eleanor's love now. But she thought of everything." Attorney Sarah then turned on the mini-recorder in the center of the table. The marble and glass office was invaded by the calm and undeniable voice of Mrs. Eleanor. The recording, which revealed the love secret and the Codicil Will, began to play. Mr. Walter Vance's face went from scorn to confusion, and from confusion to terror. The other lawyers and relatives in the room were in shock. The man they had treated with arrogance for years was the universal heir. Attorney Sarah ended the recording and placed the sealed envelope on the table, proving the registration of the codicil. "You lost, Mr. Walter Vance. And the worst part, you lost to the dignity and character you always ignored. Eleanor Vance's true twist was using your true love to bring about justice." Mr. Walter Vance tried to argue, he shouted, but it was too late. The legal system was on the gardener's side. The man who lived invisible was now the center of attention, and the life lesson was being delivered with the force of a hurricane. The silence in Walter's conference room was deafening. Mr. Walter Vance, once a lion roaring in his arrogance, was now a cornered rat. His face was red, trying to reverse what was already irreversible. This is fraud. The gardener can't possibly have the key to the vault. He's a humanity. Walter stammered, unable to even correctly form the word human, due to his total lack of character. Attorney Sarah acted quickly, with the dignity of a chess master. "The code for the vault is the word Rosiere, Walter. Something only someone who knew Mrs. Eleanor's secret of love would know. You are procedurally and morally defeated. The new owner of the Vance mansion and all its assets is Mr. Ethan." Walter was escorted out of his own office, with no immediate recourse, his professional image destroyed by his own arrogance and ambition. It was the sweetest justice Ethan could have witnessed. Not the justice of revenge, but the justice of truth. Ethan, the man who swept the leaves, now signed the papers that gave him the right to the entire estate. He didn't feel euphoria, but a deep sense of peace and humanity. His first act, alongside attorney Sarah, was to file a protection order for the mansion's gardens, his true passion, and secure a decent retirement for Mrs. Agnes. The final twist wasn't about Ethan becoming a billionaire. It was about what he would do with the money. He returned to Aspen, and his first visit was to the greenhouse, to the Rosiere orchid. He didn't change his simple way of speaking or his manner of dressing, but there was a different light in his eyes. When the press surrounded him, because, of course, the story of the billionaire gardener became news, Ethan gave a short interview, but one heavily laden with life lessons. He didn't talk about figures, but about character. He said that the greatest wealth wasn't the mansion, but the humanity of Mrs. Eleanor, who planned the perfect justice to ensure that dignity was respected. And the mansion? He turned it into a center for botanical studies and a welcoming home for the elderly, in honor of Mrs. Eleanor's kindest side, ensuring that her legacy would be one of love, not greed. What we learn from Ethan is that true strength lies not in the power to command, but in the power to be. To be worthy. So, what did you think of this twist? As the narrator of this story, I am obliged to tell you that it is not just an exciting tale. It is a mirror. It shows that arrogance is always short-sighted and that justice, when based on character and dignity, always finds a way, even if it is hidden under the earth, in a simple flowerpot. Walter lost everything because his wealth was merely material, devoid of humanity. Ethan gained everything because his wealth was the secret of love and the character that Mrs. Eleanor saw. This is the great life lesson we can take away: who you truly are is your greatest asset. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been treated with the same arrogance as Mr. Walter Vance in any situation? If you were in Ethan's place, what would have been your first action after the twist? What is the biggest secret of love you have witnessed in real life? Leave your comment below. Your opinion is fundamental to us. If you enjoyed this style of story, where justice prevails and character is exalted, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next life lesson. The power of humanity lies in the details. Stay tuned.